at the Pima Air Museum.
After they renovated it,
Yep.
they get a picture of the new entrance.
Yeah.
This plane's taken off.
That's what they flew. F4U Corsairs.
What year was that on?
Gosh, it was probably early 80s. Robert Conrad. There's a P-39 Air Cobra over there.
Is that Randy over there?
P-29.
I think you can get up to the middle of it.
Oh yeah. It was a specially built one of these that was modified certain ways that dropped the atomic bomb. And I talked to Paul Tibbets, the guy that flew the Enola Gay that dropped the bomb, and he told me about how the planes were modified. They were built by Martin in Wichita. And they didn't have this. See this area over here? See the gap between the two bomb bay doors? It had one big long bomb bay door. Didn't have that gap in between. And all the insulation was taken out. It wasn't put in, they were built new. And there were no gun turrets installed, like that bottom belly turret there, and the one on the top, and then there's a couple more further back. There's a bomb bay of B-29. Belly turret there. Bomb bay doors. Structure. Now we're looking forward. The access port. See when you had to get from the forward section to the back section in the airplane, you had to crawl through this tube right here. Because it was pressurized.
Oh, I see.
Flap actuator motors there. Torque tube. This is looking forward.
How about if I just run my head right in here and you take my video and we can get on?
These are
Film
bomb.
or else we can win $10,000.
Yeah.
Or better get one of you run your head into it.
America's funniest home videos. There's a bomb rack. See these things on the side right here? Bombs fit on there like a little rail and came right down. This is looking aft right there. See that? Right up there? That was where the gunner, top turret gunner, sat on that chair. And there's a plexiglass dome up there with a couple of guns. And you could swivel them around. I think that's a site for the remote controlled guns. See, looks like a command set down here. Remote controlled gun. Tail skid. And the tail turret. Bulletproof glass. Looks like it's about 2.5 inches thick. P-39 Air Cobra.
Can you smell the food?
Yep, I sure can. See, this is a P-39 Air Cobra made by Bell. I was going to help work on restoring this plane, but I just didn't have time to do it.
Oh, that must be unexciting.
Yeah. Because, see, there was a V-12 Allison engine that sat right behind the pilot. Mm-hmm. It was a mid-engine fighter. So normally the fighters had the engines up here in the nose. But this had the engine in the back, and there was a drive shaft that went between the pilot's legs up here to a gearbox. And you see sticking out of the nose there, black portion. That's a 30 millimeter cannon. And it fired, the cannon barrel fired through the drive to the propeller. And this fighter is also unusual in that it has doors that open just like a car door on both sides. And it has windows that roll down with a crank just like a car. Really pretty neat. U.S. Army B-29 75 BW, Army Air Force's serial number 44-70016. The 44 in there meant that it was built in 1944. Take a look.
Is this one we showed Kathy?
You're right here.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you should.
Looks like a pretty good turnout.
Yeah, I guess we're up to 140.
Hey, that's very good.
Yeah. Oh, they did a nice job.
They have.
This is beautiful in here. Of course, Neil likes it.
This is a great place to
Got
have it.
everything you want, cars and planes, huh?
I know.
You bet.
All that power.
The best of all worlds here. Yes, it is.
I can?
No, he can.
We're trying a wireless microphone here, so bear with us if we have some of the technical gremlins pop up and rear their ugly heads. We don't want that happening. Just about to get started here. We got lots of things. Hello. Okay.
That would be our
Now I know you guys.
president.
We've got lots of things to do tonight, and I want to try to
right in there by
get as much accomplished here so we can get out here in a timely manner. First of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Tom Sherwood. I know I've spoken with a lot of you on the phone. Some of you may know me from the various clubs, and I really want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. It's been a truly amazing weekend. I think it's going pretty well so far, knock wood. And pages of notes for the agenda tonight, so I've been furiously scrambling to try to recreate them in the back here. So if I go a little, get a little choppy here, I'm going to try to improvise. And heck, I might do the song Dance Routine after all, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. I first want to acknowledge some special folks. We've had several people come in from out of state. I want to thank them for traveling. We've had Bud and Dick came in from New Mexico. Where are you? Wave your hands. Right there. Oh, okay. From Arlington and the Albuquerque area, I know it's quite a long distance. We appreciate that. We had Richard Jones and his gang coming from Florida. And Richard, who's over here. From California, we have a number of people, Alan Lephart, Steve Geiberger,
other drag races or to make some other activity, but we're still making time by announcing their name. The winners in the program. First was Tibor Kadar. Alex Kadar was in second place. Both of the Kadar we're all participating in the Phoenix races today. Jeff Sams was the third place winner in the program. In the sportsman's bracket, Del Tisdale won the prize, and he got his trophy at the track last night. But we certainly should recognize it. Tom Payton, who I think is here tonight.
Sure is.
This is a sportsman bracket. Won the third place trophy in the sportsman class, and I think it's not here tonight. I think the trophy is being sent to you. In the street class, the first place winner was Greg Duncan.
We'll be doing some slides. It looks like Ed's getting this set up, and Don will be needing to flip off lights in just a moment here. Our first speaker, I want to take just a moment to relay a little bit, a brief story as to how I learned of Jim Ewen. One of my customers at work, just on a whim, we were talking about airplanes. He happens to be a publisher of a magazine that features articles on airplanes that use home-built airplanes that feature automotive power plants. And we were talking just really informally at the front counter of my business, and I was looking through his upcoming issue of the magazine that hadn't yet gone to print. And there was a beautiful illustration that was scheduled to be printed in this particular issue of his magazine. And I was commenting on how wonderful the illustration was. A little bit later in this conversation, we got to talking about cars. I related to him how my interest is in the Pontiac realm. And he looked at me a little quizzically and he said, well, you know, there's a fellow here in Tucson who's a retired stylist. He designed all those Y tracks back in the 60s. I think my jaw dropped probably 6 inches, and you're kidding. Who is this? I gotta meet him. Long story short, a couple of weeks later, we had him down to the Pontiac Club meeting, and boy, talk about a treasure trove of material. Our speaker tonight, Jim Ewen, is, I can't begin to gush enough about his talent and how fortunate we are. We've got some debut pictures that have never been seen before outside of the styling studios at Pontiac Division. And with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Mr. Jim Ewen. Give us just a moment while we get it hooked up and get our slides in order here. Don, can you grab the lights, please? Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. You don't know how happy I am to be here tonight. This is great. Everything I love in one place. Beautiful airplanes, cars, and my wife. the hat brim up. These slides are 50 years old. They stood up better than I did. Anyway, we went to Korea and bombed bridges at night with radar, very much like Kosovo today. Only we had dome bombs. This is my Dr. Strangelove picture. The B-29 was a great design. They say if it looks right, it'll fly right. I think the same can be said for cars. If it looks right and exciting, it will sell. They always pounded that into us at design staff. You have a big responsibility to design winners, as we have a lot of people to keep working. In the 30s, steel stampings became necessary to meet production numbers and costs. These new fenders and body panels needed round shapes and curves for strength. Someone had to decide what these shapes were, and the car designer was born. A beautiful car was no more expensive to make than an ugly one. A car now could look like anything a designer could imagine, a boat, a plane, or a rocket ship. But management, being wiser, looked to the custom coach builders for design themes, and they still do today. After World War II, the new younger designers were influenced by the beautiful fighter planes, the ones you see around us tonight, the Spitfire, P-38, P-51s, and soon cars were longer, lower, and sleeker. When I got out of the service, I discovered the Art Center School in Los Angeles, so I left Nebraska in my custom 37 Packard convertible. 3 years later, I came out of there with a degree in industrial design and a wife. Then off to Detroit and GM, where I spent the next 30 years doing what I love, designing cars and raising a family. The young designers then were excited by the new swept-wing jet fighters and the rocket planes that were breaking all the records out over the desert. So our designs were even longer, lower, and more pointy. GM was a design leader with all of its motor-around show cars, and this started the extravagant car shows of today that provide the industry with concepts. Well, let's go back to 1957. I'm sorry these slides really don't pop out, but I was working in the research studio on the almost completed Firebird 3. Now there was a show car, a gas turbine, automatic steering, they follow a wire down the center of the road, and 7 fins. Now Mr. Earl said, I want a show car that can have 100 people standing around it and I can still see part of it. So anyway, the fins stuck up where he could see them. They were trying to find some way to get some lights on it. They designed the car first and then decided they should have some lights. I don't think they ever did drive it at night, so it didn't matter. Pontiac Studio needed some help with their Canadian program, and soon I had the whole job. Not much glory, but a lot of responsibility and a great education in production problems and people. This was not a full-time job. There was plenty of time to help with the domestic models. This was my first sketch in the studio, and that was the taillights for the Tempest, which eventually became, the GTO. Jack Humbert, that's him in the middle there, was a joy to work with. He was a studio head. And to watch him wrap design and division management around his fingers was a real education. That's Bill Mitchell on the left and Chuck Jordan on the right. And all those drawings in the background are mine. You'll see some of those tonight. During the 60s, Pontiac was a design leader. Everyone copied us. This is a 64. I had quite a bit to do with the headlight design and some of the grill texture and lots of odds and ends and pieces around the car. We had a division that encouraged us to go all out for exciting shapes, and they would find some way to manufacture them. We had Funky Knudsen, Pete Estes, and John Valorian, all on first-name basis in the studio. They really enjoyed coming to styling. I think they thought of it as their playpen. They could get away from the office and come down to our place and play. Well, we soon pushed Plymouth out of third place, and we were building a car every 58 seconds in that one dirty old plant down going to show you some of my sketches and artwork. A lot of them were just wallpaper to help make the studio a colorful place, an exciting place, to keep our management aware that we were thinking ahead, and the division engineers shaking their heads and saying, how are we ever going to stamp that? Oh, well, a few good ideas would often come from the details, such as lights, wheels, and etc. So I'm going to start just going through these fast. This is a over-under headlight arrangement. I always thought of it as a double-barrel shotgun. Some grill texture and foot openings. This was a big rendering. It was up in the front end board, up the front of the studio as you come in the door, doing some of that Rembrandt stuff where you have a light source. There's airbrush on black paper. And like I said, we get wheel designs and other little things from these pieces of wallpaper. These are 4 or 5 feet long, 2 or 3 feet high. How Tom ever got photos or slides of them, I'll never know. This was one that you can tell was about the time of 63 with the reverse curved backlight and that sort of thing. This is a car on Mars with a lot of red dirt in the guy. You got to wear space helmets. You do anything to attract attention to your renders, because you have to be a good salesman to sell yourself and your designs. And I said, well, Pontiac always had exciting taillights, especially after the 62 hockey stick taillight, we call it. So our cars had to be identifiable from, 2 blocks away. Our front ends were always present at the front of the car was the face and the back was the other end. But the car always had to have a face in the back end. This was a taillight I always thought should be Gato. It's a positive shape sticking up out of the sheet metal. You can see it from the side. Back in the Tempest days, different headlight arrangements, slightly different. Another 66 GTO headlight surge for the ends. Car out in the Sahara Desert, you see the pyramids and camels in the background and the sunroof open. Again, unusual taillights. Another rear end design. Pontiac is about the only division I know of that would make bumpers that would maybe design. They could stamp them out somehow and manage to throw chrome down into the crevices and make it stick pretty good, although Detroit salt would often eat some of it off on me. Another rendering on black paper. Pontiac emblem over to one side. Racing is always a big thing at design staff. Bill Mitchell had his Corvettes and everything. He could do anything racing. He'd come and go, yeah, that's it. Make it red and make it look like racing, and he was thrilled with it. This is obviously a show car over in Africa. Background forever. Another over-under headlight arrangement. We can turn out a sketch a day, and of course we'd only have to put out 1 car a year, so you always had a lot of extra things left over. You could never get them all designed, so you knew a lot of it was just showbiz. You notice he's wearing a racing helmet. Another kind of a different front end or fender arrangement, grill, and of course grill openings are thermostatically controlled. Zippy station wagon, we call it a shooting brake. If 4 headlights are good, 6 design management set up an international studio to handle designs and liaison with local Vauxhall and Holding. So I took my Canadian program and became the assistant studio head there, then moved to other advanced studios as chief designer. This is a bit of a Riviera. We were doing a show Riviera in the studio at the time. And this is a Miata type little sport car. When I did a sport car, I had a cut down door. I still don't know why we don't do it. I think these cars are saying only head sticks out, but it's kind of funny, but I suppose it's a safety consideration. This was during the psychedelic area. I thought, well, it's in psychedelic hubcaps. And as the car rolls, all the colors will blend into silver, and it'll look just fine going down the street. Tom calls this, well, this is the first car with power doors. Tom calls it my clamshell car. It opens up completely. The seats are cantilevered, and just everything is wide open. And of course, with safety considerations and airbags and all those things now, that wouldn't work anymore. But detail how the seats are cantilevered. I think Pontiac's starting to do red instruments in some of their cars. Well, there's some back in 1968 or whatever it was. There's yellow. And taillights, I thought, should have different shapes for different functions, for the stoplight, the turn light, and backup lights, and all that. As I said, racing was a big thing. Here's a clear plastic racing air brake. I don't know what the driver's doing on the left side. I sort of like me. I can't remember why I did that. But you'll see the heads-up instrument, speedometer on the windshield. It's nothing new. We just didn't have the electronics and the ability to produce them at a decent cost and make it work. So now they can finally do those things. I call this a little king's car. If you remember the comic strip where you had a car that's about 14 feet long. I mean, 14, the hood is 14 feet long. And here's the back. And of course, three-wheeled cars and rocket ships and all of that. I hope I haven't made you think I'm a grumpy old designer that thinks only we knew how cars should look. Every era is different, with different influences and manufacturing processes. These are a bunch of cars in the latest GM magazine. The Cyclone up in the upper left-hand corner is the one I worked on. We're talking about pursuit planes and fins and all that. And that car had a fold-down glass top that's stored between the rear wheels. The upper right, I guess, is a lightweight car design. There's a three-wheel commuter we did. Below that is Bill Porter's show car. And below that is a yellow design for a Corvette, I guess. I think the kids today are getting some of their influences from Power Rangers and Transformers and Power Mogs and all of those things. There's a couple of, Trans Am or a Camaro, and then there's a Cadillac Jelly Bean. And then above that, of course, is a SUV show car. And you wonder whether they're getting their influences for SUVs. All I have to say they're getting them from Mark 64 tanks and Humvees. So, anyway, ours was a big iron V8. Brute power, roll up the asphalt, longer, lower, more chrome, and better era. Today, with the government dictating fuel economy and crashworthiness, it's a computer-controlled 200-valve aluminum engine with wind tunnel design bodies and smooth flush grills and lights. Well, of course, the automatic car wash people love them. And our cars, well, the detailers love them. I'd like to thank Tom Sherwood and his father for helping me organize this presentation and forcing me to get this stuff out from under my bed and have fun showing it. Been laying down there and gathering dust for years. That was a dragster in Detroit Dragway years ago, but I figured they didn't do front wheels if they did it right. They could get little wings up there and control them right. They could keep them going straight. I guess they could wallpaper for the studio. A parting slide. This is where most of my life's work winds up. There are 7 of my cars in that pile that I did little parts and pieces suit up. But anyway, thank God there are enthusiasts like you out there to keep a few of the good ones polished and in roar. So that's it. Now, if I turn off the light, it'll be dark in here, so I'll let him turn off the light. No, we did it all by hand with a compass. Yeah, of course, most of the wheels you wind up making them in clay and making plaster cast, and then they'd make a fiberglass cast and spray the conductive paint and chrome plate them and bring them up, stick them on the cars and take them on the patio and see how they look. They were all wheel covers, most of them, until the steel wheels came along. Forgetting what they call them now. Art Center School in Los Angeles, that was the mecca for automobile design at that time. And I'd say over 75% of the designers and the design staff came from Art Center. And now, of course, it's created a center in Detroit. All the Fish and Body Craftsman Field, I don't know if you remember that, but they used to always give prizes every year, and the students that win a scholarship and all go off to Art Center, and then they wind up getting back to design staff again. My wife worked at Art Center, and she was a treasurer. I was on the GI Bill, and every month she'd give me my check, I'd sign it and give it back to her. I'd get $3 or $4 real cash. Yes, I knew that Cole. I was never too impressed on him, but he did the Vega and a few other cars. Anyway.
I didn't hear what you said about the GTO emblem.
I designed that emblem for the GTO. Went up to the graphics studio where they did our emblems and we worked with the design, with the graphics designer. Got it from the ring back down. There's always sticker at the bottom that was the top so it would stand out, the magic annual, pitch lights and all that. I think I gave Tom one of the original brass prototypes that we make in design staff. We tried to stick them on the car like you had tape and just about time to take a picture of it out there, big ball. Then we'd be out in the patio with the PSS and those guys and they'd be telling us, oh, move the emblem up a little bit, over a little bit, down a little bit. And we always knew where it went. Just about as soon as they go home, we put where we wanted it. They didn't remember it. Well, that peach-colored Grand Prix out here is pretty close to it. The 63 Grand Prix is all the beauty too. I know it's under the reverse backlight. That's pretty close to my favorite. And the 66 GTO. Yeah. That's it. I did the taillights on it.
Were you involved with doing stack headlights? Because that was a very distinctive part of Pontiac.
No, I came in the studio when the 63 was pretty far along. I imagine Jack Humbert originated that. He used to set his office with a tiny little pen and a normal sheet of 8x11 paper and do a tiny little sketch and go out and that would become a car. And all of us designers out there would be doing wallpaper these never get their illustrations. I was just fortunate to be able to get mine out of the design staff because when I went overseas, I put it all on a big packing crate and they took it to the warehouse, and I came back from overseas, and after about a year or two, the guy ran the warehouse and said, well, what are you going to do with this crate? I said, well, take it down to my house. So GM delivered them to me. I didn't see them. Well, I certainly agree with you. I think the Chrysler cars are absolutely beautiful. And I don't want to be blamed that some people did a trip at design staff and let it all slip. And the way it's managed now, I talked to people who are still there, I guess it's a very different place than when I was there. Studio head was a studio head, a big man, he ran his place and ran it like he wanted to. We used to have Harley Earl, who was a dinosaur. He was a very big guy. He was the first big designer. And he'd come into the studio and he'd stutter. He was a great big man. He'd take cars. You sons of bitches are going to design this car the way I want it, or I'm going to get myself a new bunch of sons of bitches.
Neat stuff. Really neat stuff. Jen has published a book recently, which I'm very happy to own a autographed copy of, and I've read and I've cherished every page, every story. This may sound like a plug, but gosh darn it, I want to plug this guy's book. It is an awesome book. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to simply turn the floor over to Mr. Jim Wangers.
I gotta tell you, I've given a lot of talks. Mr. Ewen is going to be a real tough act to follow.
Yes.
I need the PA system because I don't have the good voice anymore. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, speaking, folks, is always one of those events that I look forward to because the Pontiac miracle, as I often call it, the Pontiac achievement, the Pontiac lore, is so much an important part of the whole history of the U.S. auto industry. And I think that Mr. Ewen was even a little more modest than he should have been when he said that Pontiac was at the leadership level, at the forefront of new car style. Really going back as far as when Funky Knudsen took over in the late 50s and introduced this whole concept of what I'm labeling the great wide track era, which is when Pontiac pulled their really big turnaround and became the serious player in the car business that they ultimately became. Also, talking to you folks reminds me of a real funny situation that existed in Detroit when I used to live there. I knew a young lady who was teaching school in one of the Detroit public schools. In fact, she was in the inner city, and she had a class made up of all kinds of foreign-born students and really had a serious communications problem. She was really troubled by this, and one day we got into talking about it, and I said, you know what I'd like to see you do is play some games with these kids, teach them some things, you know, in the area of competition and fun, and she thought that was not a bad idea. So she decided to use that as a concept of history, American history. What she did is come up with some real famous American sayings. So when the class would come in the morning to assemble, she said, all right, class, I'm going to give you a very famous American saying, and I want you to tell me who said it and under what conditions and where. And so she started out the first day with a great line, "Give me liberty or give me death." Well, this little foreign-born class, and there were some American-born students there too. They stumbled around, they looked at each other, they got very uneasy, and so did she, because the answer didn't come up real fast. Finally, a little Japanese girl in the very front of the class got up, and she said, "Teacher, that was Patrick Henry, and the occasion was the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia in 1778, which happened to be absolutely correct." Well, my friend got so excited and so relieved that her first day was somewhat of a success that she began to extol this wonderful student from Japan, and isn't it a shame, class, and she began to reprimand some of the American kids for having a foreign-born student know more about their history than they did. She went on maybe a little too long, and finally a little guy in the back of the room got up and said, "Ah, screw Japan." She says, "Who said that?" He said, "Lee Iacocca, Detroit, 1997. Well, getting us off a little bit on the loose side, I've got a lot to say and not very much time, because I'm trying to cover this wonderful wide track era, which started, as I said, really in 1956 when a guy by the name of Bunty Knudsen took over the division. As my colleague, Jim Ewen, said, you show me a seriously successful effort. I don't care whether you're in the car business or whether you're in the teaching business, it's people. And what we have in our Pontiac world really are three guys who deserve most of that credit, at least at the leadership level. On the far right is Seaman E. Bunty Knudsen, who took over the division, as I said, in 1956. On the extreme left is Pete Estes, Elliot M. Pete Estes, as he was known, who was Mr. Knudsen's hand-picked chief engineer and moved in to be the general manager when Mr. Knudsen was promoted over to Chevrolet. And in the center, of course, John DeLorean, who was named chief engineer when Pete Estes moved up to general manager, and then when Pete, too, moved over to Chevrolet, John moved up to become general manager. These three guys enabled guys like myself in the marketing area, guys like Jim Ewen in the styling, a lot of the names that he mentioned, they enabled us to do our thing because they were so supportive and they were pointing in the right direction. We were actually providing them the kind of creative help that they wanted and they needed. Now the Pontiac V8, as we know it today, really, actually goes back all the way to 1955 when it was introduced along with the Chevrolet V8 at 287 cubic inches, and really was supposed to start a whole new era for Pontiac. It was introduced in a nice car. I think, unfortunately, that's about all you could say. Nice car. And unfortunately, it had a modest little flurry of success in 1955, and by 1956, it was headed downhill, and that was not acceptable. So the corporation decided they either had to make a mind up to get rid of the division, and let me tell you, that was under serious consideration. And it was a whole lot easier to drop a division back in the 50s than it is today, to be honest with you. And they finally decided to bring in a new general manager, as I mentioned before, Mr. Bunty Knudsen. They gave him 5 years in which to turn the division around. And if he did not show significant improvement in sales in that 5-year period, the division really was going to be folded in either to the Oldsmobile or the Buick division. Well, the first thing Mr. Knudsen faced when he came aboard was the upcoming introduction of the 1957 Pontiac. And this is the car that he was shown. Unfortunately, it carried over that theme that had been so much a part of Pontiac in the early 50s, the great silver streaks, which you see adorning the hood of this 57 Pontiac. Mr. Knudsen actually came early summer 1955. I'm sorry, early summer 1956, and he didn't have a whole heck of a lot of time to do anything with this 57 car. But the one thing he did do was to pull off those silver streaks, which in some way kind of improved the looks of that car. He was also fortunate enough to have been greeted by a new engine displacement. It moved up from 316, where it was in 56, to 347 and 57. And another thing that really brought a little attention to Pontiac is that the grill that had been designed for the 57, and maybe Jim, you can comment on this a little bit later. It was jokingly referred to on some of the radio comedians and some of the wags that praise the auto industry as being an exploded view of a Remington electric shaver. Unfortunately, it was. 57 also gave birth to what we all know today as perhaps the most collectible, the most sought-after Pontiac in all of its history. It's the first fuel-injected car that was built by Pontiac on the assembly line. There were convertibles only, in just a couple of choices of colors, and as you all know, some of them have been known to go for in excess of $100,000 even today. By 1958, the Bonneville had become almost an accepted car. It shared an exclusive body with Chevrolet's Impala. We were one of the lesser known cars in 58, which was the year of the chrome mobiles. Any of you happen to remember what a Buick and an Olds looked like in 58? It was almost frightening in terms of the amount of chrome. Pontiac, which looks like it's pretty heavily laden with chrome there, was one of the better efforts. But Funky Knudsen's first car really didn't come about until 1959. That's how long it took to get a car ready. Remember I told you he came aboard in 56. His first car, which really was, a total of his efforts and all of the team members, appeared first in 1959. Now they tell a funny story about this. I wasn't there, so I can't tell you that I heard it or I witnessed it, but they were looking in the styling studios at a 1959 body sitting on a 1958 chassis. In those days we had bodies and chassis, they weren't unit construction. And of course the 1958 had a significantly narrower tread than what ultimately came about in the 1959. And Mr. Knudsen was supposedly talking to some of the styling heads, in this case the styling studio within GM at the Pontiac, and he said, that car looks a little bit like a football player wearing ballet slippers. In other words, it's just sitting on too narrow a platform. And so when this car bowed in 1959, it was with a new, wider tread. And I'm here to tell you that unfortunately this was not a result of serious engineering research and all kinds of handling tests and safety improvements. It was basically a styling decision to move the wheels out further. Unfortunately, some of the marketing folks said, this is a saleable feature. And we're going to hang some kind of a name on this, which is exactly where the term wide track came from. When this car was introduced, it was called the only car with wide track wheels. Wide track wheels went on to mean wide track ride, they called it wide track drive, and finally, after several years, got around to what it should have been called in the first place, the wide track Pontiac, which was not only alliterative, but a pretty good image building concept. The 59 car was improved even more when the 60 came out. There was a bunch of differences of opinion among the marketing folks, as well as for the sales and styling folks, as to whether the split grille theme was really right, or whether they should go back to a conventional grille. The conventional grille thinking won out in 1960, and even though this car was a huge success, it's often referred to as a coffin nose or a shark nose. In fact, the 60 owners today, of which is made up of all 60 car owners, call themselves the Shark owners. They even have a publication called The Shark. And even though this car did very well, it sold very well, in 61 it went back to the split grille theme. And as you all know, that has never gone away. Some years executed better than others, but the split grille became another good symbol of what was now known as the wide track Pontiac. 62, and here's a good example of one of those neat taillight themes that Jim Ewen talked to us about. This is the 62 car. What we're looking at here is some of our attempts to promote the car as a performer. Here the car was being used as a push car for a dragster. In course, what we were trying to say here is that the Pontiac is almost as much fun to drive as the race car itself. This was our first effort to kind of get our feet wet in enthusiast marketing. We didn't waste a whole lot of time, however, because when the 421 came out, we were really flying, not only in the areas of performance, but also in active racing, which we were very early to get involved in those days with the NASCAR activity and our Super Duty engine program. This one, if you can see it there, is one of the first times we ever ran an ad without a car in it. But it was a pretty good effort, especially with that neat line which said, if you can't read it in the back, hands off the grab bar, Charlie, you're tearing out the dash. Which of course refers to those old nice grab bars we used to have on the right side of the instrument panel, which of course today the DOT would just have a heart attack if anybody tried to show something like that, sticking out, waiting to be hit. This is a painting, a very famous painting, which was awarded to the Pontiac dealers at the end of the sales year, 1962. It's an original painting that was done for Pontiac, showing the very famous Fireball Roberts winning the Daytona 500 in February of 1962 with our Super Duty engine package. The white car, which is a 61, was not unfortunately in second place. That was David Pearson. He was a full lap behind. And that blue car, I'm not sure I can make out what it is, but it wasn't a Pontiac. Seriously, Plymouth in 1962 was driven by 19-year-old Richard Petty, and he finished that close to Fireball in the 1962 Daytona 500. This painting was awarded to the dealers if they met or beat their sales quota, which was assigned to them in 62. And I'll bet you that today, if you went around and looked at some of the personal offices of the Pontiac dealerships, you would still find this painting framed and sitting on the wall someplace. It's a very treasured item. Swiss cheese car. If you look very closely at the frame, which is exposed behind the rear wheel, you'll see that it has literally some holes drilled in it. That was what it was actually called, the Swiss cheese car, because it looked like a piece of Swiss cheese. The frame was lightened all the way around by cutting those holes in it. Nifty idea. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Every one of them broke their frames before the year was over. Of course, that meant a serious job of realigning and getting them not to dog track. It was just unfortunate. Unfortunately, also, this was the year that Jeff announced they were going to pull out of active participation in any kind of motorsports. And as a result, these 63 cars which were in the field were forced to run in a factory experimental class rather than as super stockers. General Motors had announced we're not building